The night was darker than usual, and the wind carried the smell of rain across the open land. James Harlow sat alone in his small wooden house miles away from the nearest neighbor. His old radio played a soft country tune, and the clock ticked slowly on the wall. He had spent the day fixing a broken fence and feeding the cattle. Life on the ranch was quiet, steady, and lonely. It had been that way since his wife passed away 5 years ago. James had learned to live with silence. He spoke to his horses more than to people. The town nearby, called Farridge, was small and friendly on the surface, but he preferred distance. He came to town only for supplies, and most folks left him alone. They called him the Lonely Rancher, though he never minded that name. That night, as the wind picked up and thunder rolled in the distance, James was ready to turn in early. He checked the locks, turned off the light, and stood by the window for a moment, watching the storm. The land outside was empty except for the movement of trees. Then, from far away, he thought he saw a flash of light, like someone running with a lantern. He frowned. Nobody came out this far at night. The nearest road was half a mile away. He stepped outside, pulling on his coat, the rain starting to fall in cold drops. For a moment, he thought it was just the lightning playing tricks on him, but then he heard it, a sound faint and desperate. Someone was shouting. The voice came again, closer this time.
"Help! Please help!"
James froze. It was a woman's voice, weak but filled with fear. He rushed back to his porch and grabbed his flashlight. The beam cut through the rain, and in the distance he saw movement. A figure was running toward him, stumbling through the mud. When she reached his porch, she almost collapsed. Her hair was wet, her clothes torn, and there was a cut on her forehead. She looked no older than 25. Her eyes were wide with terror as she whispered, "Help! Now, or I'm dead." James caught her before she fell and helped her inside. "Easy now," he said gently. "You're safe here. Sit down." She shook her head. "No, they'll find me. Please, you have to hide me." "Who will?" he asked, confused. "Them," she said softly. "The Beaumonts." James frowned. He knew that name well. The Beaumont family owned much of the land around Farridge. They were rich, powerful, and respected, or at least that's what most people thought. "You're hurt," James said, bringing her a towel and some water. "Let me call the sheriff." Her reaction was instant. She grabbed his arm, her fingers trembling. "No! Not the sheriff, please. They work for them." James stopped. Her fear was real, too real to ignore. "What happened to you?" he asked quietly. She hesitated before answering. "I was working at their farm," she said. "I thought it was just a job, taking care of the animals. But they wouldn't let me leave. They took my phone, my ID. They said I owed them money for food and rent. I tried to leave once, but the sheriff brought me back. He said I signed a contract." James stared at her, shocked. "That doesn't make sense. You can't keep someone like that." Her eyes filled with tears. "They can here. Everyone's afraid of them." The rain outside grew heavier, the thunder closer. James felt torn. If what she said was true, calling the sheriff could put her in more danger. But keeping her there might bring trouble to his own door. He walked to the window and looked out. Nothing but darkness and the sound of rain. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Lila," she whispered. "Lila Grant," he nodded slowly. "All right, Lila, you can rest here tonight. In the morning, I'll drive you to the next town. We'll find someone who'll listen." She nodded, her body shaking with exhaustion. James gave her a blanket and set a cup of warm tea on the table. As she drifted into uneasy sleep on the couch, he sat nearby, thinking. Something about her story bothered him. Farridge was small and secrets didn't stay hidden long, yet he had never heard anything like this. Sometime after midnight, he thought he heard a vehicle on the dirt road. He turned off the light and peered outside. Headlights appeared far off, then stopped near his fence. A truck. 2 figures stepped out. One of them shined a flashlight across the field. James's heart began to pound. Whoever they weren't lost. They were looking for something or someone. He waited until the truck turned around and left, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they'd be back. At dawn, James loaded his old pickup and woke Lila. "We should leave before anyone comes," he said. She nodded weakly, still pale and tired. Just as he started the engine, he saw a sheriff's car pulling up his driveway. 2 deputies stepped out, both men he recognized from town. "Morning, James," one said, tipping his hat. "We got a report about a missing girl. You seen anyone out here?" James glanced at Lila, who was sitting low in the seat. Her eyes widened in fear. "I haven't seen anyone," James said carefully. The deputy smiled, but his eyes were cold. "Funny thing," he said. "Someone spotted lights on your property late last night. You sure about that?" Before James could answer, the other deputy walked around the truck and looked inside. He froze when he saw Lila. "Well, there she is," he said. "You gave us quite a chase, miss." Lila tried to open the door, but the deputy grabbed her arm. "You're coming back with us," he said sharply. James stepped forward. "Hold on," he said. "She says you're working for the Beaumonts." "That true?" The first deputy's face darkened. "Watch your mouth, Harlow. You don't know what you're talking about." "She said she doesn't want to go back," James insisted. "You can't just—" "Step aside," the deputy ordered. His hand rested on his belt. "We're handling this." Lila looked at James with desperate eyes. "Please, don't let them take me." James's stomach twisted. He wanted to fight back, but he knew what would happen if he did. The deputies were the law in this county. One wrong move and he'd end up in a cell himself. They put Lila in the back of the car and drove off, leaving a trail of dust behind them. James stood there in the road, rain dripping from the brim of his hat, his chest heavy with guilt. He spent the rest of the day in silence. Every sound of the wind made him look toward the road again, hoping she'd somehow return. But she didn't. That night, as he walked out to check the gate, he noticed something lying in the mud. It was a piece of red cloth, Lila's scarf. He picked it up and saw a dark stain on the corner. His hands trembled. He looked around, but the fields were empty. Something wasn't right. If they'd taken her safely, she wouldn't have dropped this here. The next morning, James drove into town. He asked around at the diner, the post office, even the sheriff's office. No one claimed to know anything about a woman named Lila Grant. When he asked one of the deputies from the day before, the man only smiled and said, "You must have imagined her." James left, his jaw tight. On the way back to his ranch, he saw something pinned to his gate. A folded piece of paper held by a single nail. He pulled it free and opened it. Inside were 3 words written in rough black ink. "Mind your business." James looked out across the empty land, the wind rustling through the grass. For the first time in years, the silence of his ranch felt heavy, not peaceful. He turned and walked back toward his house, gripping the note tightly. He didn't know who to trust, but one thing was clear. Farage was hiding something dark. And whatever had happened to Lila, he couldn't pretend anymore that he hadn't seen it. James could not sleep that night. The note pinned to his gate burned in his mind. "Mind your business." He kept reading those words again and again, trying to understand who could have written them. He knew the truth. Someone wanted to scare him into silence. But the more they tried to stop him, the more he felt something inside him refused to stay quiet. For years, James had lived a peaceful life away from trouble. He had no family left, no close friends, nothing to lose. Maybe that's why fear did not hold him back anymore. He thought of Lila's terrified face, the way she had whispered for help and how helpless he had felt watching her taken away. He couldn't let that be the end. The next morning, he drove back into town. The streets looked calm as always. People smiled, waved, and went about their business. But now James saw the town differently. Behind those friendly smiles, something was being hidden, something no one wanted to talk about. He stopped by the local diner and sat at the counter. The waitress, Martha, an older woman who had known him for years, poured him coffee. "You look tired, James," she said softly. "Something on your mind?" James looked around before speaking. "You ever heard of a girl named Lila Grant?" Martha's hand froze for a second, then she quickly looked down. "No, can't say I have," she said, forcing a smile. "You want pie with that coffee?" He could tell she was lying, but she was scared. Everyone was. After breakfast, James went to the town library. The librarian, Mr. Keene, was a quiet man who kept old records of everything. When James asked about missing people, Mr. Keene hesitated but eventually pulled out a dusty file from a locked drawer. Inside were old newspaper clippings, reports of young women who had moved away suddenly or gone missing without explanation. The last one was from 2 years ago. They stopped writing about it after that, Mr. Keene said quietly. People stopped asking questions. "It's safer that way." "Safer for who?" James asked. Mr. Keene just shook his head and whispered, "Be careful, Mr. Harlow. Some truths aren't meant to be found here." James thanked him and left. But now he knew. Lila wasn't the first. That night, he sat at his kitchen table staring at the pile of notes and clippings he had gathered. He decided to write everything down in case something happened to him. As he wrote, he heard a vehicle pull up outside. His heart raced. He turned off the light and looked out the window. A black pickup truck sat at the end of his driveway. Someone got out, walked up to his fence, and left an envelope before driving away. James waited a few minutes before going out to get it. Inside the envelope was a small flash drive. No note, no name. Just the device. He plugged it into his old laptop. The screen flickered and a video began to play. The image was dark and shaky, like it had been filmed secretly. He could see a basement dimly lit by a single bulb. And there, tied to a chair, was Lila. Her face was bruised, her eyes wide with fear. She was alive. James's breath caught in his throat. The video showed her whispering something, but there was no sound. Then the camera turned slightly, revealing a man in a sheriff's uniform walking into the frame. The video cut off suddenly. James sat still, his hands trembling. He didn't know who had sent it, but it was proof, real proof, that she was still in danger and that the sheriff's office was part of it. The next morning, he drove to the city, 2 hours away, to meet a journalist he remembered seeing once on TV. Her name was Clara Boyd, known for exposing corruption in small towns. He waited outside the newspaper office until she came out. When he told her everything and showed her the video, she listened carefully without interrupting. When the video ended, she leaned back and sighed. "You realize what you're getting into, Mr. Harlow?" she asked. "If this is real, these people won't let it go quietly." "I don't care anymore," James said. "Someone has to do the right thing." Clara nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this carefully. I'll make some calls. Don't go back to Farridge for a few days. It's not safe," but James couldn't stay away. That was his home, his land. He returned that evening, driving carefully, checking his mirrors every few minutes. When he reached his ranch, the gate was open. He always kept it closed. As he drove in, his headlights flashed across his barn, and his heart sank. Someone had broken in. Tools were scattered, hay bales knocked over. On the wall, painted in red letters, were the words, "Stop digging." James took a deep breath and looked around, but whoever had done it was gone. He cleaned up quietly and locked everything again. That night he barely slept. 2 days later, Clara called him. "We're ready," she said. "We've sent the video to the state investigation team and some major news outlets. Once it's out, they can't hide it anymore." James felt a mix of fear and relief. He knew this would bring trouble, but he also knew it was the only way to help Lila. That evening, the story broke online. The video spread fast, and within hours, state police arrived in Farridge. The Beaumont property was searched, and the local sheriff's office was placed under investigation. From his porch, James watched the flashing lights in the distance. For the first time, the town wasn't quiet. Helicopters hovered, reporters gathered, and the truth began to come out. The Beaumonts had been running an illegal operation, using threats and control to keep people silent. The sheriff and a few deputies were part of it. Lila and several others had been held on the farm, forced to work without pay and kept hidden from the outside world. When the rescue teams reached the basement, they found Lila alive. She was weak and frightened, but she was free. Clara later called James to tell him the news. "She asked about you," Clara said softly. "She said you were the only one who believed her." James felt tears in his eyes for the first time in years. He didn't say anything for a while, just looked out at the open land, the sunset glowing over the hills. In the weeks that followed, the town of Farridge changed. The Beaumont name disappeared from the local signs. The sheriff's office was replaced and new people were brought in. But many residents still avoided talking about what had happened. Some even blamed James for bringing trouble to the town. He didn't argue with them. He just went back to his work, fixing fences and feeding his cattle, trying to bring peace back to his land. One morning, a car drove up to his ranch. When James came out, he saw Lila step out slowly, smiling shyly. She looked healthier now, her eyes brighter. "I wanted to thank you," she said softly. "If you hadn't helped me that night, I don't think I'd be here." James smiled gently. "You did the hard part," he said. "You kept fighting." They sat on the porch for a while, talking about simple things, the weather, the land, the quiet. Before she left, she gave him a small wooden cross she had carved during her recovery. "So you don't forget me," she said. He looked at it for a long time after she drove away. The ranch was quiet again, but it no longer felt lonely. It felt like a place where something good had finally happened. Months later, a small memorial was placed at the edge of his land, honoring all those who had been hurt and never found. James stood there during the small ceremony, hat in hand, listening to the wind. When reporters asked him how he had the courage to stand against the town, he simply said, "Sometimes, doing the right thing means standing alone." After that day, James rarely went to town, but people came to visit him, young folks who wanted to know the truth, who wanted to learn from his story. He told them only one thing: never look away when someone asks for help, because one day it might be your voice that needs to be heard. And as the sun set over the wide, open fields, James felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. The kind of peace that comes when you know you've done what's right, even when it costs you everything.